Okay friends, it's time to get started on our radiator. Let's make our way over towards the driver's side of the engine compartment. We're going to come right over to this area. This is your coolant cap. You want to make sure it's nice and cool to the touch. It's not hot. You didn't just come back from a nice drive. Assuming it's nice and cool, go ahead and turn it counterclockwise, and we'll lift it up and away from our face. Now you want to give this a quick inspection. You want to make sure that the seal is still in good condition, and overall it looks as though it's still in reusable shape. Assuming it's still good, let's go ahead and set this aside, and now we can make our way under the vehicle to start draining the system. Now let's make our way underneath the passenger side front of the vehicle. We're going to be looking for the drain for the radiator. If you were to look along the passenger side rear of the radiator, you're going to be able to find it. To be able to gain access and drain the radiator without making a complete mess, we're going to remove this entire lower bracket. To do that, let's remove this push clip using a trim tool. We'll carefully remove the center. Once that's loose, you can remove the rest. The next thing you want to do is move along to removing your three 13mm headed mounting bolts. Now let's lift up on the radiator a little bit, and we're going to start separating this. Remove your rubber mount. We'll give that a quick inspection and put that in the bracket. With that out of the way, let's continue on with draining the coolant. Now to do this, you want to make sure you have a nice collection bucket under the area. I don't have to say this, but I will anyways. Hand and eye protection at all times. Let's go ahead and turn this petcock counterclockwise until it starts draining out the coolant. Now you can let that fully drain, and then we can continue. Now that it's finished draining, I'm just going to go ahead and close up the drain here. Now let's make our way back under the hood. Now up inside the hood, we're going to move along to removing the air inlet. That's this area right here. To get this off, we're going to start over here. For this, you can either use a flathead screwdriver or an 8mm socket. We're going to loosen this only enough that we can slide the hose off of the top of the air filter housing. Now let's move along to this area. We need to disconnect this hose. You can choose between either this side or the side closest to the engine. All you want to do is squeeze the clamp, slide it towards the center of the hose, and then remove it. Now that we have both of these broken free, let's make our way to the driver's side of this. Under this area, you're going to find another clamp. Once again, flathead screwdriver or 8mm socket. Now we can carefully grab onto this. We're going to try to lift it up and off and away from the engine. Give that a quick inspection, set it aside. With that out of the way, the next thing that I always like to do is cover my throttle body. I don't want anything to fall inside the engine. I'll just use a nice clean rag. We'll put it right in here. The next thing we're going to do is continue on to removing our corner push clips. I'll remove this one over here. Now if you were to pull this aside, you're going to go ahead and remove this 10mm headed bolt and the upper radiator bracket. Now that we have that one out of there, let's continue on over here. We'll pull this one out of here. That's going to give us a little bit more area to be able to tug on this. Now you'd want to do the same thing on the other side. Now we'll do the same on the other side. Now let's move along to the upper radiator hose. We're going to follow this right down to where it connects onto the radiator. There's going to be a clamp on this, and that can be in multiple positions. The position that I'm in is a little bit difficult to get to. For my application, I'm going to have to use a tool that looks like this. If it's facing in a direction that you can access with pliers, you can also go ahead and do that. Now that I've got this on here, I can go ahead and slide that clamp out of the way. Okay, nice and easy. Be careful not to damage that radiator. There it is, friends. Now we can slide the hose off of there. Once you get it off, just give it a quick squeeze. Make sure it's still soft and pliable and it's not damaged in any way. Now at this point, we're going to continue on by disconnecting our transmission cooler lines. Make sure you put a nice collection bucket under the area so you can recycle the fluid properly. Now this is pretty much shaped like a U or even maybe a W depending on how you look at it. But essentially you just want to find an ear of it and then pull it right off of there. When you do this, keep in mind it is under spring tension and you don't want to lose it. Now we can grab our transmission cooler line. We're going to give this a little wiggle to break it free from the radiator. Give it a quick inspection. Make sure it doesn't look like it's rotted or damaged in any way. Once that's out of the way, let's continue on a little lower. You're going to find your other radiator hose. Go ahead and squeeze that clamp, slide it up the hose, remove the hose from the radiator. Commonly, to remove a hose from a radiator, you may need a hose pick. If you're using something like this, be very careful not to poke or damage the hose in any way. I'm just going to slide it in between the radiator and the hose itself, work it around a little bit, and then we should be able to slide the hose right on off of there. Once again, a quick inspection, make sure it's soft and pliable and not torn or worn. Now we're going to reach down here. I'm going to carefully hold onto the top of the radiator, trying to press it down a little bit. I'm also going to grab onto the cooling fan. I'm going to try to lift that up. Now we can carefully pull our cooling fan off of here, and the next thing that I always like to do is try to hang it up and away from the radiator. You can do that with something such as a bungee cord or whatever you might happen to have. Now it's time to make our way back underneath the vehicle. We're going to come right over to the driver's side. I want to go ahead and remove this push clip so I can slide this out of the way. Once we have that out of the way, we'll continue on to our lower transmission cooler line. Now we'll slide the transmission cooler line out of the radiator. Now the next thing we're going to do is carefully try to put something close to the bottom of the AC condenser. That's this area right here in front of the radiator. The reason why I want to have something close to it is because we're going to start dismounting it from the radiator. You're going to find two 10mm headed bolts along the bottom. Up along the top, there's just going to be some little clips that it slides into, so you don't necessarily have to worry about that. But once we get these bolts out and we start pulling it down, we just want to bring it towards the front, closest to the bumper cover, and keep it away from the radiator so we can continue. Obviously, we don't want to leave this hanging on the AC lines. Now we'll just go ahead and separate this from the radiator and carefully pull it down onto our support. Now I'll carefully slide the AC condenser towards the front bumper like I had mentioned. At this point, we're going to start lifting the radiator up, and we want to slide it away from this bracket. Now we can carefully start pulling this down and out of the vehicle. With the radiator out of the car, let's continue on by removing all of our air baffles. Let's start with each side. For this, you just want to carefully pull it up and off of here. And just give it a quick inspection. We're going to transfer this right over to the brand new radiator, so I'm going to keep it where I know where it goes. Now for this one, it just slides up and off of this ridge. You can see the groove where it slid into. Now it's time to grab our brand new radiator. Inside your kit, you're going to find that it came with 2 new fittings. Let's put those in the brand new radiator now. Right there, it feels as though it bottomed out. I'm just going to continue tightening this just a little bit more. There we are. Now we can turn this over. Let's continue on putting on our air baffles. Once you have those on there, let's continue on with these 2 pieces. Now for these, if you were to look where my index finger is, you can see that you have an area that protrudes that has some threading. The area that protrudes with threading needs to be on the inboard aspect of this, so we're going to have the flat area facing up and out. Make sure that hole is lined up and do the same exact thing on the other side. Now we can get this into the vehicle. Now it's time to install the brand new radiator into the vehicle. We're going to carefully start sliding this up into place. As we're doing it, we're being very careful not to damage the radiator cooling fins in any way. There we are. We'll just carefully slide it into its mounting position up here. Let's get our bracket back in here. You want to pay attention for your rubber grommet that's supposed to fit over the radiator. We'll take this bracket and we're going to slide it right over the bracket that's located on the subassembly. Start in all 3 of your mounting bolts. Snug them up. Now we're going to slide the radiator into its location on the mount. Now it's going to be time to remount the AC condenser. Have a look up along the front top of your radiator. You're going to find a hook on either side. That's the hook that the AC condenser needs to slide up and into. Once you have it in position, go ahead and put in your 2 10mm headed mounting bolts. Now that they're started, let's go ahead and snug them both. Let's get our transmission cooler line reinserted into the radiator. Once you hear it give a good click, you want to try to give it a tug. I'm trying to actually pull it out of the radiator as hard as I can without damaging the radiator. The reason why I'm doing that is because I do not want this transmission line to come loose while I'm driving down the road. Once you're sure it's secured, go ahead and lock it in with your plastic locking clip. Now let's resecure our plastic to the brackets. Now let's make our way back inside the engine compartment. We're going to put on our radiator hose. We're going to slide this all the way down up against the radiator so it's completely bottomed out. Once you have this bottomed out against the radiator, continue on with sliding your clamp back into its original position. Once you have your clamp on there, give this a nice tug. Once again, I'm trying to pull it off of the radiator. Assuming you can't, we can continue. Let's get that other transmission cooler line in. There we are. I heard an audible click. I'm going to give this a nice tug. Obviously, I want to make sure it's nice and tight. Let's lock in that locking clip. Now we can continue on to our cooling fan. We're just going to carefully lift this up and we're going to try to slide it in position. If you were to look underneath this transmission cooler line, you're going to find a hook on the radiator that the fan needs to go into. Directly underneath that, below the rest of this, you're going to find a second one, and then the same on the other side of the car. Now once you have all of them lined up, go ahead and carefully press it down. Now let's move along to resecuring the transmission cooler line to the fan shroud. I'm just going to press this right in. Let's make our way over to the other side of the car. We'll slide the upper radiator hose on. Once it's bottomed out, go ahead and slide that clamp into the proper position. Now let's put in our radiator brackets. Line up your bolt hole, start that in there. Before I tighten this one, I'll start the other one as well. Let's get this lined up. Now we can tighten both of our mounting bolts. Time for some push pins. Let's continue on up here. We'll remove our rag from our throttle body. Give it a quick inspection inside. Make sure nothing fell inside your throttle body. Assuming that looks good, we're going to continue on by reinstalling this. We want this area to fit right over the throttle body, the hose to go onto the engine, and then we have this hose right here, which goes onto the upper air filter box. Now I'm going to swing this down. We'll get this lined up. Before I press this down all the way, I'm going to move over to my hose that connects onto the engine. Let's resecure our hose to the engine. Now we'll tighten our clamp. Make sure it's nice and tight. Now we'll move over to the throttle body side. We're going to press this down to make sure it's completely situated. Now we'll just double check it and make sure it's completely up against the engine. Tighten that clamp. At this point, I'm going to carefully grab onto this and I'm going to try to give it a tug. Try to remove it from the engine. I want to make sure everything's nice and secure so no dirty or unmetered air gets drawn into the engine. Now you're just going to want to double check all of your work. Everything needs to be nice and tight and completely secured. After that's all done, let's make our way over to the reservoir. We're going to continue by adding coolant to this. When we're adding, you want to be paying attention to the level. You can see right along this area, it has an aerial that faces down. Essentially, right along this line is where the coolant level should be. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and add some Dexacool coolant to this. It's a specialty coolant, and you do not want to mix it with any other type of coolant. With that said, I'm going to continue topping this off, and then we're going to run it. Now, once you have this topped off, the next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and run the vehicle for a little while. What we want to watch is for air to start bubbling out of this and coolant to start making its way down. You're going to continue topping this off along the way. Make your way into the passenger compartment. We want to have the temperature setting on hot with the blower motor on high. Essentially, that's going to help open up the thermostat and allow the coolant to flow properly. That's going to help burp out all the air. Once you're sure you've got all the air out of there and you've got plenty of heat coming out of the vents, continue on by double checking the fluid level, and then just go ahead and put your cap back on. Okay friends, we got our radiator installed in the vehicle. Of course, we let it run for a little while and we made sure that we burped out all the air from inside the system and we re-topped off our coolant. Now at this point, I'd like to take it for a road test. I want to make sure I still have plenty of heat coming through those vents, and of course I'm going to pull over into a safe place and I want to make sure I don't have any coolant leaks. Aside from that, thanks for watching.